Totally agree with you. I've been on a few of the marches for Palestine and was so pleased to see Jewish people supporting the cause. I feel as much for them as I do for the people of Palestine and Lebanon, all suffering at the hands of the Israeli leaders. That needs to be pointed out more often. If there were a clearer definition of anti-Semitism, it would be easier to express abhorrence of actions as opposed to a religion. I don't know. Maybe. It's not a thought I've had before. Lots of messages like that coming in. I'm looking for some different perspectives, but apart from old Joel there accusing me of anti-Semitism because we're talking about attacks on synagogues as opposed to something to do with Sudan, I don't actually have any at the moment. Afternoon, James, writes Margaret. Like you, I'm appalled by the Israeli genocide in Gaza and by anti-Semitism, and I am vocal in my criticism of both. But a lot of people don't speak out about the former from fear of being accused of the latter. That's definitely true. Stephen's in Shrewsbury. Stephen, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thanks. I'm a Jew. I don't practice the faith. I haven't done for a long time. I've got family in Israel. Yeah. But I think it was probably around the time of the Lebanon War, 79, and some of us, I was probably in my late teens then, were starting to say, hang on a minute, this is not where we want the country to be going. Yeah. So we started to criticise the Israeli government, and our friends would look at us and say, you can't do that. So fast forward to now, via a lot of wars, and we're in a situation where I don't talk to many of my old Jewish friends. They haven't really fallen out. I think they just were going on a different path. Okay. And actually, recently, I think what's been happening, because the way that the Israeli government directed the war against the Palestinians has started to make even those people wonder about whether the Israeli government can be separated from your identity as a Jew and therefore can be criticised. But I think one of the big problems is that that's culturally embedded. Yes. And it's really, really hard. You know, I've got family who are practising the faith, and I would find it difficult to talk to them without it ending in, you know, cold silence.
Because you see, that's the strange thing, isn't it, for non-Jews, is that I can understand it, but I'm never going to feel it. The idea that I will support everything that is done by any government of Israel if it is done in the name of our security, because of the shadow of the Holocaust still being so long and so dark, and Israel being the place where you go when it starts happening again. So it's a part of your identity not to criticise.
When I was 16, we went out in an organised trip, and I think it must have been around the time that one of the popes was doing his world tour, and he used to get on the ground at wherever he landed and kiss the ground in a very sort of demonstrative thing. So me and my mate did that when we got to Tel Aviv airport, and we were overwhelmed with joy. And then over the next few years, it became a horror show. I've got family living out there. I lived out there for a while. I protested against the government with Israeli Jews. Yes. And everybody had a reason why we were wrong. But there are people in Israel who are Jews working with Palestinians every day. My nephew is one of them. And they don't get on the news.
We've tried on this programme. We've had a few on this programme. But
it's so important to recognise that good work.
The self-appointed spokespeople and the official spokespeople are always speaking from a position of supporting Benjamin Netanyahu's government, and whether they do it explicitly or implicitly, imputing anti-Semitism on the part of anybody that criticises it.
No, absolutely. But the truth is, everybody hates Netanyahu in Israel. They support him because they're trying to get whatever it is they're trying to get. And remember, in Israel, the government is proportional representation, and it's a very weird one, because the Arabs don't get a proportional vote as such. But it means that the right-wing little parties, they can club together and then hold sway, and then add to the mix the American military-industrial complex and all the money, and you've just got a recipe for disaster. We should look at that and worry about what's happening here, and the cultural identity of the flag and all that stuff, because we need to not forget that there are people working across the tracks holding their hands out. You know, like I do know about people coming together and sharing.
And yet it doesn't fit the footballification narrative, does it? It's as if you have to pick a side, as you've discovered with the friends from whom you've drifted apart over the years. You're not allowed to find common ground or fellow feeling. Thank you, Stephen. I can sense the suffering that you've gone through over the years as you've wrestled with this stuff, and you've clearly been wrestling with it for decades. Well, we've only really turned our attention to this specific element of the conversation today. I don't know, how helpful was it when there was a letter, wasn't there, published in the Financial Times by members of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and then they got suspended for expressing misgivings about the war in Gaza. I don't know what happened to that story. I think they were planning to appeal at one point, but the letter was published in the Financial Times, and resulted in the people who signed the letter being suspended, what they described as the enhanced punishment of effective expulsion from the Board of Deputies of British Jews. And I guess that adds to the idea that no one's allowed to speak out, especially Jewish people like you, Stephen. Chris is in by...
2 teenagers are being held by police over an arson attack aimed at a synagogue in north-west London. This from the Metropolitan Police. We'll get the detail of it from Andy Hughes in just a second and hear from Michelle Lassman. After that, an administrator at United Synagogue in North London. Her great-grandfather-in-law, in fact, founded the Kenton United Synagogue, which is the one that was attacked. We'll hear Michelle's response in just a few minutes. But Andy Hughes, LBC's crime correspondent, what do we know about what happened? I mean, the case is active, 2 teenagers being held, but what do we know about what happened?
Yeah, well, a bottle of accelerant was thrown into the synagogue over the weekend. 2 teenagers have been arrested, and this is just one of several attacks that have happened in London that counter-terror police are investigating. And one of the main lines of inquiry is that is the use of proxies by foreign states. Now, the use of proxies isn't a new thing, and indeed in the last few years there's been a big uptick of criminal and terrorism cases whereby individuals or groups carry out criminal acts or plots to attack the UK or British citizens. Generally, how it's worked is that foreign threats have targeted sympathisers or people who share their ideology to carry out these attacks. Now, counter-terrorism policing have launched investigations into 6 separate incidents in the last month, and they are actively exploring links to Iran-backed terror networks.
In all of them?
In all of them. Without going into details about these specific cases, security sources have told me that they've seen a shift in methodology by foreign states. Instead of targeting groups who share their view, they are offering cash to criminals to carry out attacks on their behalf. Met Police Deputy Commissioner Matt Dukes, who himself used to be the head of counter-terrorism policing in the UK, shared some interesting detail on the Nick Ferrari show this morning.
What we've seen in those who have proved to be thugs for hire is an enormous range of backgrounds. So, very much British-based individuals. It's cash for the action. So often not with any allegiance or any alignment to the cause. But what we do know is there are racists and thugs in the UK already who can be mobilised.
A newly established militant group who are calling themselves the Islamic Movement of the People of the Right Hand have claimed responsibility for these attacks and several others across Europe. When they first emerged, I think it's fair to say that the security services didn't really know much about them. But since that initial attack in Golders Green of the arson attack on the ambulances, security services have been digging deep and focusing on this.
They claimed that fairly quickly.
They claimed that straight away. And I'm told that this group is now being taken very seriously by MI5, MI6 and counter-terrorism policing.
Because it's one thing, and we've seen it, sadly, in our country, it's one thing to see terrorist attacks inspired by ISIS or inspired by one form of Islamism or another. But it's another thing when it's directed by, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And
a country.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen Russia do this, and MI6 have been warning about this for years, and they've been seeing several cases. There was a case in 2024 where a 21-year-old drug dealer carried out an arson attack on behalf of the Russian-backed Wagner Group. He was jailed for 17 years, and he made around £50,000 for that attack. All he wanted was the cash. Now, so far, these attacks in North London in the last month, they've all followed the same ideology, which they've been targeting institutions and buildings, but the fear is that this could then escalate.
Jewish institutions and buildings.
Yes, Jewish institutions, yes, that's correct. Joe Trusman is a senior research analyst for the Foundation of Defensive Democracies and has been looking into this group.
I think the goal was to create a psychological terror, specifically targeting the Jewish communities across Europe. Also Western targets as well, as we've seen attacks on and forwarded attacks on banks, for example, American banks in Europe. But the focus is on the Jewish community, I think, and it's psychological terror. And so far, from my observations, it's worked. Right? That's very important. It's working, successful. It's getting media attention.
And what the Deputy Commissioner is warning is that anyone who carries out these attacks on behalf of foreign states will face the full thrust of the law and will likely face several years in jail, just like that case I mentioned previously. He is called, sources have been telling me that the people who are doing this are gullible buffoons, and they are keen to stamp this out.
Young criminals
who
fancy a quick buck.
Exactly. It's easy money. They have no ideology, like this. They just want to make quick, fast money, and these foreign states are offering them that option.
It's the same MO, isn't it, as organised crime?
It's exactly that. And what used to happen was, I've reported on several cases in the Old Bailey where Bulgarian nationals or foreign nationals have been used by Russia to try and plot terror attacks. This is a new phenomenon that they're saying, and it's one that security services are nervous about. Yeah, I'm not surprised. And it's worth saying, the focus of our conversation is on attacks on Jewish people and Jewish institutions. Home Office stats on this are interesting because I think the reason I'm raising this at all is I think as a community, just as a country and in our own communities, whoever this kind of stuff is happening to, whether it's just an individual racist being an idiot and being hurtful or worse, harmful to a Jewish person, a Muslim person, a black person, whatever, an Asian person, it behoves us all to respond to that, I think, doesn't it? And the Home Office statistics are interesting. The Muslim community, the most targeted group with 4,478 cases, most targeted numerically, including a spike in Islamophobic hate crimes following the Southport knife attack. But Jewish people with a much smaller population here in the UK experience more than 8 times as many hate crime incidents per head of population. So that gives you the context. Both are appalling, but it gives you the context of this, doesn't it? Yeah. The intensity for the Jews in Britain at the moment. Absolutely, and it's increased massively. It's more than doubled since the October in 2023 attack.
Thank you very much, Andy. Andy Hughes, LBC's crime. listen, a story that's come out of southern Lebanon, but Israel as well, because it involves an IDF soldier desecrating a crucifix. And when I say a crucifix, I don't mean a jewellery kind of crucifix. I mean one of the full, very tall wooden crosses with a substantial, probably life-size figure of Christ on it. Noga Tarnopolsky joins me to talk about this, freelance reporter in Jerusalem, a regular voice on the programme. Noga, tell us, first of all, what happened and what the Israeli response, including the government response, has been.
Hi, Sheila. Well, first of all, I can share with you pretty much breaking news, and it's that the Israeli army announced it has identified the soldier in question. He appears to be one of the commanders of an engineering brigade who were in southern Lebanon in a Christian town in which the residents had been given permission by the Israeli army to remain there as long as they don't harbor or didn't harbor any Hezbollah militiamen or terrorists. So I could tell you he has been identified. The Israeli government responded very slowly to this incident once again, and the Prime Minister Netanyahu, put out a statement, I think about 2 hours ago, only in English, not in Hebrew, in which he expressed deep shock and sorrow for what he called, I think it was the desecration, or he strongly condemned the desecration, what he called a Catholic icon, which surprised me because I think he, of all leaders, would know that all of Christendom reveres Christ, not just the Catholic Church. And I don't think we're done with the reverberations of this. I expect that the army has said that this doesn't represent the values of the IDF, and that this individual, and probably more, because someone was also filming him, right, will be treated probably. But all we know thus far is, after many hours in which there were a lot of pretty serious rumors about his identity online, the army finally admits that they have identified him.
And, you know, obviously it's a statue and there are real living flesh and blood human beings being killed in this war and other wars. So it's important that we remember that. However, these crucifixes and the figure of Christ on the crucifix in this instance looks pretty life-size to me. And in a sense that adds to the shock value, doesn't it? It's not just a kind of, an ugly religious desecration, which we've seen in many places before, and I'm sure we will again. It looks like an attack on a human. That's the problem. It looks like an attack on a human being, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. But I think that that's one of the problems. I think the initial reaction to the graphic is one of shock, because it really does look, as you said, like, you know, the very violent decapitation of a human being. But I think that beyond that, you know, there is an extra layer of insult and inflicting pain on people when you desecrate holy figures for them. There are many, many, many people in this world for whom the desecration or the destroyal or the violent assault against a figure that they revere or that they consider, you know, an icon of worship is a very, very deep insult. And Israel, that has a significant and important and ancient Christian population. For example, I'll just tell it to you flat out, Sheila. I was really shocked that the Prime Minister of Israel didn't express any apologies to Christian Israelis over this desecration. They're Christians who serve in the Israeli army, who are probably disgusted by what happened and want answers. They're Christian leaders in this country. They're Christian leaders around the world, of course, but there was something detached and cold in the reaction that we've had. And it also, again, came about 2 days late, leading one to the sense that, you know, only in English and a bit late, that it was sort of a reluctant statement from a reluctant Prime Minister.
Aimed at the world, not at Israel and Israelis.
Exactly. And that the reason that's an important point for me is that I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu personally has anything against Christians, but he has created a political base in Israel of extremists, and in some cases violent extremists, for whom desecrating other faiths is a tenet of their faith. And Netanyahu can't be caught in the current horrible political predicament in which he finds himself defending other faiths. So what you see inside Israel is former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, for example, came out today in favor of gay marriage in Israel. He's a religious man. He wears a kippah on his head. He comes from really what used to be called the ultra-right in Israel, settlement leadership. But now he's in some kind of a sane center, versus the Prime Minister is someone who doesn't have it within him to apologize and to question how it is even possible that a soldier in the Israeli army could do such a thing.
I mean, again, we can't read that soldier's mind, but it occurred to me that I asked myself, could it have been prompted by, in him as an individual, by the very vocal comments of Pope Leo about both the Iran war and comments about Trump, but also about the war generally. I wonder whether, we'll find out, I guess. I mean,
we don't know, Sheila. Neither one of us is a psychologist. And, it's entirely possible in my mind that this guy doesn't even know of Pope Leo. Not every Israeli is worldly and globalized. He just may be someone quite filled with hate, which I do think is something we clearly see in that image. And beyond that, I can't really speculate. But I do allow myself to make comments on the Israeli leadership that I think have a public responsibility, to respond.
And when you talked about the kind of sort of political base that Netanyahu has allowed to ferment, really, are you talking about the likes of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir when you say that? Who have been whose voices have been so key in fermenting the violence on the West Bank?
So hate-filled, also hateful towards their fellow Jews, we should add. Anyone who doesn't feel or express Judaism in their way is considered as good as gone by them. But I do want to emphasize, it's not just them. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are two people whose marginal extremist parties were created basically as organs to support Prime Minister Netanyahu's shrinking Likud party that remains the biggest political party in Israel. But Netanyahu has taken it intentionally to the hard right, and there are members of his own party, ministers representing his own party, who have notions no less extreme than Ben-Gvir and Smotrich do. And none of them, to my knowledge, not one minister had one word to say about this incident in the last 2 days. And again, they might not have particular feelings towards Christianity, these ministers, but they should have feelings about military discipline and about Israel's image. And one has the feeling that the entire government is just too detached, too busy with politics, too busy trying to keep the prime minister out of his own trial to really bother with these events that are, one after the other, a global PR catastrophe for Israel.
Thank you, Noga, for joining me today. Noga Tarnopolsky, freelance reporter.